Oh, I think they will, but first of all, let me say this. Thank you, Trent Dilfer. I feel like I've been a man on an island for the last few months, not anti-Burrow, because I'm not anti-Burrow, but just so pro-Tua that I think he's the pick at 1. And hearing Trent Dilfer say he's the best prospect he's ever seen is somewhat validating for me. But the fact of the matter is Cincinnati is going to take Joe Burrow. We know that. But if we are to take Trent Dilfer's analogy to its furthest logical conclusion, Cincinnati is not going to be the team that makes the biggest mistake here. Yes, they'd be passing on a Maserati, but at least they still have an Audi A8. It's Washington who would be passing on a Maserati because they've got a used Corolla that they don't want to get rid of, right? Like, we look at this only through the lens of Cincinnati. But if Trent Dilfer's right, then why would Washington not take Tua Tagovailoa at 2? Think about the options here. If they take him at 2 and let him sit a year, as some of the medical experts think he should or would be best for him, you have Dwayne Haskins there. Dwayne Haskins is either good or he's bad. If Haskins is good, then you will be able to trade him for exactly what you used to draft him, a mid-first-round pick. If he's bad, well, then, yeah, you wasted that first-round pick, and you're not going to be able to trade him for anything or much of anything. But then you are thrilled you have Tua Tagovailoa. Either way, it's the right move. And we do this thing, Wildes. It reminds me of the 05 draft. 05, San Francisco takes Alex Smith, passes on Aaron Rodgers. And they're the team that we always say they screwed up. But what about all the teams after San Francisco that also passed on Aaron Rodgers because they thought they had their quarterback? What about the Browns, who had Trent Dilfer, oddly enough, so they took Braylon Edwards? What about my Chiefs that had Trent Green, so they took Derek Johnson? What about the Houston Texans, who had David Carr, so they took Travis Johnson? If Tua is the guy that I think he is, Wildes, and that Dilfer thinks he is, then it's not just Cincinnati that should take him. Washington should be thrilled to take him over Chase Young.
Jenna, I'm going to do a thought experiment with Nick here, because I'm a guy who loves recommendations. I like book recommendations. I like movie recommendations. I like restaurant recommendations. So, Nick, I'm going to throw it to you. Can you give me your most enthusiastic restaurant recommendation in Kansas City if I go there?
Oh, no, that is the easiest question ever. I know everyone's going to say the barbecue, and the barbecue's amazing, but you can't go wrong with the barbecue. Stroud's Home Pan Fried Chicken. So you go there, there's literally a little small farm with chickens in the back, but chicken's not all you're going to get. With every meal, you get this amazing chicken noodle soup. They have per-piece fried shrimp, the best shrimp I've ever had, and the fried chicken livers and gizzards are basically free with this brown gravy. It might be the best restaurant in America, Stroud's Home Pan Fried Chicken in Kansas City. There's one in Overland Park. That one's good. There's one up north. That one is maybe the best restaurant in the world. I'm glad you asked.
Okay, so here's the thought experiment.
Clearly.
We all just heard that. Wouldn't it be weird if I was just like, nah, I'm going to go another way? Thanks for that. Best restaurant in America. I'm going to go a different way. That's what Trent Dilfer is telling us right now. If we could put up the quotes that he is saying about Tua, I don't know how, if you trust Trent Dilfer, and I do, that you can't go wrong on this. Here's quote number 1. The single best prospect I've ever studied in my years of doing it. Okay, sounds good. It gets better. Quote number 2. Whoever gets him wins the draft because you're getting a Hall of Fame player. All right. Quote number 3. He's a 1%er human being. Talent, leader, anything you want to say, he's a 1%er. Jenna, I trust Trent Dilfer. He's a Super Bowl champion, and he knows what he's talking about. I think that teams are making a huge mistake if they don't listen to Trent Dilfer and try to get Tua.
Coach, one of the things that Trent was talking about was how much Tua offers, not just on the field, but off the field as well. You've been through this draft process already as a coach. How much weight do you place on the intangibles, the football knowledge, the leadership, you know, his presence in an interview? How much weight do you place on that? Because that's where Tua, at least according to Trent, is really, really shining.
Yeah, I placed a ton of weight on that. I just need to respond to it to a couple of things. I really like Trent Dilfer, but he's not afraid of hyperbole. And if you think that he is the single authority on quarterbacks, then yeah, you should go with what he says. When I listen to Nick, you're talking about the Kroll in Washington, but last year at this time, you really liked that player. You thought he was more in line with the Audi A8 or the Maserati, and to get to the Maserati analogy, those cars are great if you're on the Autobahn. And really, Alabama is like being on the Autobahn, but they're not as good in LA traffic, and they tend to break down a lot, and those are chances that you take. So it's hard to say definitively one guy is going to be a future Hall of Famer. If we could do that, then nobody would miss on quarterbacks. Everybody has different things that they like, just like your recommendation for a restaurant. If you don't like chicken, you're not going to go to the restaurant that Nick offered. And that meal, those things have to fit in with what you do. To get to your point about character, he has outstanding character. One of the issues about Alabama players, though, is that they're playing as close to pro football as you can get, and they're surrounded by a ton of talent, and sometimes their talent can be looked at as being fully developed. So you take a chance with those guys because you're not sure how much they're going to continue to develop. And when you look at injury history and things like that, you want to be as clean as possible, especially the higher you draft. You want to be able to look at your checklist and not have to take chances on character, on injury history. If you're in love with the guy and if your doctors feel strongly that the things that have happened have been the normal course of football and it's not a pattern, then yeah, you go with it. But you want those players to be as clean as you possibly can be.
Nick, I want to just ask you a little bit more about what you were bringing up earlier. If you're so high on Tua and you seem to think that teams should be, flush that point out a little more. Why do you think Washington, too, isn't even considering taking Tua?
Oh, well, I'm not certain they're not considering it. We're just not associating them with but it's probably because Chase Young looks like the safest pick. Chase Young looks like an instantaneous, just like the Bosa brothers were, pass rushing Pro Bowler out of Ohio State. It's like, okay, we had Joey Bosa, then we had Nicky Bosa, now we have Chase Young, edge rusher out of Ohio State that immediately becomes an all-pro talent. But the fact of the matter is, you go back through every draft in recent NFL history, or even further than recent NFL history, if you had the benefit of hindsight, you know who would go at the top of every draft where there is a franchise quarterback? The franchise quarterbacks. In 2018, as good as Derwin James, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Christian McCaffrey, or Quentin Nelson, Saquon Barkley were in that draft, you had to do it over again. Lamar goes number one. 2017, even if you love Christian McCaffrey, even if you love Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Jamal Adams, it goes Mahomes, then Deshaun. And so if there is a franchise quarterback, the only way to get value at two is to take him. And I just want to kick it back to Coach because Coach made a good point. Coach, you're absolutely right. I was very high on Haskins, and I still actually am not selling my Dwayne Haskins stock. So maybe the Corolla analogy was a little unfair. But if Haskins is the player that I thought he was, he still, to me, doesn't have the ceiling that Tua does. But if he is, Coach, then you play him for a year and you get your first-round pick back for him. If he's not, if I were wrong, then aren't they going to be glad they drafted a quarterback number 2? Because that means they need a quarterback. Don't I have that right, Coach?
Nick, you're absolutely right in the sense that if you believe that the quarterback prospect is going to be your franchise quarterback and you have uncertainty with the guy that you currently have, you have to go get that guy. You have to take the chance on the quarterback because it changes the trajectory of the organization. It changes the trajectory of the team, and it's something you have to do. You need a conviction. You need to have a conviction, and you need those guys to be as clean as you possibly can. And you also need to have some sort of conviction on the guy that you have in the building. And I don't know if at this point Washington can say they do either good or bad on Haskins.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.